So, welcome to this little podcast that we have. So, Jen and I have been asked a few questions in relation to performance anxiety and how to overcome performance anxiety. And this is for a research paper for a student. And in answering these questions for her, we thought we'd turn it into a podcast which may have some value for those who are listening. So, question number one. Was asked what factors influence sports performance anxiety and what strategies can be used to help mitigate sports performance anxiety in female athletes aged 16 to 18. So do you have any answers to that first, Jen? I know I wrote an answer. So I'm just going to read off the answer that I wrote to this one, and I think there's some valuable tips in here if you suffer with sports performance anxiety. So factors that influence sports performance anxiety, in my experience, have been primarily related to negative thought loops that are centered around imagining a future outcome that the individual does not want to happen. So using their imagination to imagine what does not want to happen in the future and feeling fear about it in the moment. Rather than being focused on what they do want to achieve, the outcome they do want, the individual performance anxiety is looping thoughts about what they do not want to happen. So performance anxiety is an inability to control your thoughts yet, and everyone can learn that. So the focus is on fears they have about the outcomes they do not want. The fears are created by the meaning the individual is giving to the outcome, not the outcome itself. An example of this is fear of making mistakes. That's a huge common one. So it's not the mistake itself, it's the meaning the individual is giving to what a mistake is. A mistake becomes more than a mistake when we give it special meaning. Okay, so a mistake when you're practicing in the backyard is not as meaningful as a mistake in a championship game, for example. But that's the individual giving that more meaning. So we'll carry on. Instead of imagining and visualizing that which they do want, so this would be called mental rehearsal of exactly what you do want to happen in the game, imagining yourself kicking the ball perfectly into the net versus what if I kick the ball over the net? I'm going to feel so bad. And they're imagining what they don't want to happen. So instead of imagining what they do want to happen and mentally rehearsing that, they are instead imagining and visualizing exactly what they do not want to happen. And a lot of this is happening unconsciously in their mind. They're doing this unconsciously. So when we get conscious of that and take ownership of our thoughts, we can then begin to manage our thoughts. And this is the beginning of taking control of performance anxiety, in my opinion.
And when you were saying that, it made me think of when a person of any age is thinking, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to mess up. Right? They're rehearsing that in their mind, whether they're conscious of it or not, whether they're aware of it or not.
They're focusing on what they don't want.
Exactly. And then when it happens, it's like, oh, wow, you actually worked perfectly because you've been so focused on not messing up and you messed up. So great job. If we can retrain your mind, then you're going to be able to do the opposite.
Yeah, what you focus on is what you'll get.
Yeah.
The whole idea that what you focus on is what you'll get. Yeah, great add-in. So, as I said, this is most done unconsciously. So, the fact is it feels real in a person's mind, but in reality, it's just their imagination, and it's causing a real feeling, but it's not real. And when I say the idea of what they're afraid of is not real. Sure, it might happen, but it's not real because only this moment is real. The past is only a memory and the future is only in our imagination. Neither actually exists. It's just in our mind and imagination. And it's an out of control use of our tool, our ability to remember the past and learn from it, and our tool for the future to plan was out of control because we're imagining what we don't want to happen, and we're buying into that as if it's real, and we're feeling super scared. And the fact is, most people's anxieties never come true. And I think if you're listening to this, you would probably agree with that. 95% of our anxieties don't actually come true. And when they do, they're never as bad as what our minds make it out that they're going to be, right? So examples of the most common fears that I see people focused on, and more specifically, student athletes, in this case for this answer, female athletes age 16 to 18, but everyone. The most common fears that I see people focused on are fear of making mistakes, as I said earlier. And it's not even the fear of making mistakes that they're worried about. It's more of the rejection of themselves for making a mistake. They're worried about the self-attack. They know if they make a mistake, they're going to treat themselves. They're in this pattern of talking to themselves, in a bad way, attacking themselves. You should have done that better. And sometimes this can be built from a coach yelling and screaming, or teammates yelling at each other when they make a mistake instead of supporting, hey, you'll get the next one. So I think that is a factor to fear of making mistakes. Fear of judgment from others, so worrying about what others think is a common one, and comparison to others. The fear of letting other people down, which I think comes from a deeper fear of not belonging. Same with fear of judgment from others. So the deeper fear of not belonging, not fitting in, or not being liked is essentially a desire to just belong. So if you don't feel like, if you don't have a deep acceptance of yourself and a deep belonging within yourself, it can create a desire to really need to fit in with everyone else, and you'll do anything you can. And this is where I think a lot of fear of judgment from others comes, and a fear of letting others down. Another one is fearing what the coach thinks. Obviously we want the coach to think good of us, but then we have this fear, and we take more responsibility of what we can't control, more responsibility of what than what we have, and we try to control what we cannot control. And then another example is fear of losing the game, and that's a normal one as well. So ultimately, in my opinion, mistakes, losing games, getting judged by others, etc., that's all they're a very normal thing. You cannot control them. The problem I have found that causes performance anxiety lies in what meanings the individual with performance anxiety is giving to these things. So, as humans, we are the meaning makers. So one person might think, well, if I lose a game, I get to learn so much from that game. It's going to motivate me to win the next one. So I like losing. So what? And then another person might be like, if I lose a game, that means that I'm such a bad player, and I'm never going to make it to my ultimate goal of playing in college. And especially if I make mistakes. And you can see the meanings that we give to things is why we get performance anxiety. And same goes for getting judged by others. One person might think, if someone judges me, that means they're not going to like me, I'm not going to fit in, and I'll just never fit in. It's just, oh no. And then another person might say, if others don't like me, then they don't know me. I'm proud of myself. I accept myself. All my friends like me. So if others judge me, then is what it is. That's their opinion. But I know who I am. And I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of what I do. So that's and that is I guess a bit more of a mature thing to develop, and it ultimately recognizing that everyone's going to have their opinion, etc. But yeah, let's move on. So performance anxiety is a problem because it pulls the individual out of the present moment, away from their senses, out of flow state, and brings them into their head. And in my opinion, this causes rigid thinking and a huge decrease in performance. So a few strategies that I've found to mitigate sports performance anxiety are as follows. So first, get conscious of the thoughts and focus. So what are you thinking about which is causing performance anxiety? So if you slow yourself down before a game and ask yourself, if I've got anxiety right now, what am I thinking about that's causing that? What do I have to be thinking about to cause performance anxiety? Because I can guarantee that if you're actually thinking about, well, all I'm thinking about is having the perfect game. I'm imagining myself doing really well. I feel like we're going to win. I'm confident and I'm focused on all these things. Yes, you might still have some nerves because that's a natural adrenaline release into the body, but ultimately you probably wouldn't have performance anxiety. It's pretty hard to, and a lot of this comes out of my experience as a boxer, which, going out and fighting someone in front of a lot of people is the ultimate way to learn how to manage your thoughts and emotions, because you get a lot of I had to work to overcome performance anxiety very quickly in my career. So essentially, first getting awareness. What are you thinking about that's causing performance anxiety? What do you have to think about that causes performance anxiety? So what are you imagining? What outcome are you imagining? Is it what you do not want to happen? Then just get awareness of that first. 2, what meaning are you giving it? So if it's fear of making mistakes, what meaning are you giving it? And this is a bit harder to do alone. It's so much easier to do with support, with someone, even a friend, or even journaling. If you are alone, journaling about it and really thinking through it. This is a way of learning how to manage your own thoughts.
And we even did this last night on the Her Power Academy call, on the group call with one of the girls.
Yeah.
The meaning she was giving to the fear of getting injured, of fear of going hard into tackles.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example. She had anxiety about going in hard, putting her full body into tackles. So she was hesitating. And so we explored the meanings that she was bringing to what a tackle means, and it really come up for her. She was focused on getting injured, and that might mean that she's gonna then fall back even further into getting in recovering from that injury. She'll fall behind and not be as good as the other players,
because she's already not getting the amount of playing time she wants. So she's like, well, I can't possibly go further back than where I am now because that would be so challenging. And then I was mind reading a bit into, well, if that happens for her, she's worried about how that will impact, potentially college.
Yeah.
For example. And then,
so she's thinking future. She's focused on exactly what she doesn't want.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example. Yeah. So what meaning are you giving it that's causing it to be a bad thing? So a mistake is just a mistake, guys. Mistakes happen randomly. They happen to the best players in the world. So if it's a mistake you're worried about, what's going on there? So also, what beliefs do they have to overcome, or what beliefs do they have about the outcome that they are imagining that is causing performance anxiety? So once you understand what you're focused on, once you get awareness of what you're focusing on, what beliefs or meanings you're bringing to what you're focused on, then we want to reframe the meanings. We want to develop a new belief structure around that, and something that's actually going to give you a more powerful result. I've got written down here, for example, if I make a mistake, it means that I'm not good enough and I'll never play D1 soccer. So that's an example from a client I actually had, and that was the deeper meaning. I'll never play D1 soccer, which was her goal. So a new perspective, new reframe might be, okay, so Ronaldo and Messi can make mistakes, right? Well, of course. So the best in the world can make mistakes and be good enough, but you can't, right? So are your teammates allowed to make mistakes? Yes, but you aren't? And the fact that you're not allowed to make mistakes, is that helping you or hindering? Well, it's hindering because it's putting pressure on. I can't make mistakes. So how can any person become better at their sport without making mistakes? Right. Okay, so what is a mistake? You can learn from a mistake. So now we're starting to shift the meaning. Mistakes are for learning. They don't mean anything bad about you. They're just, what can I learn from that? So when we start to see mistakes are a normal part of the learning process, they become a valuable thing now. So now we're shifting the meaning of what this thing that's causing me performance anxiety is, and we can start to break the structure of performance anxiety in this person's case.
And what's jumping out at me here, which is what is part of what I've been working on in my own area of performance anxiety, is the fact that with this perspective, like your mistake making isn't fixed. Your future isn't fixed. One mistake doesn't define your whole future. That's not how you're always going to be making mistakes. Mm-hmm. So there's that, and I don't think that's talked about enough. But also a layer that I think is beneficial as well on top of this is bringing in or exploring trusting yourself. Like, do I trust that when I make a mistake or when I make mistakes that I will reevaluate. I will evaluate how I did after the game, after the practice. I will make changes. I will take different actions. And then I won't keep making those mistakes, right? Because I think that's part of the fear that's unconscious, at least for me. If I make this mistake, well, my teammates are always going to see me as a mistake maker. I'm going to always be a mistake maker. And then therefore, it's going to very negatively impact my future goals versus, oh, I'm not fixed. I'm not a tree, like you said to me. Mm-hmm. I can evaluate. I trust myself to evaluate.
I can improve.
Yeah, I can improve.
So it's like, if you keep making the same mistake, essentially, so what we tell our clients, if you keep making the same mistake, so some mistakes are just random, they happen, but some mistakes you might keep making, well, that's trying to give you some information. Well, it's not anything about you. It's simply you haven't practiced that one thing enough. So if you keep kicking the ball, passing the ball inaccurately, and it's not going to the person, then it's not like, oh, I suck. It's just simply, I can work on my passing and improve it. It means nothing more than that. So ultimately, mistakes in this scenario actually make you a better player. They help you master your craft. They're your ultimate teachers. So you can feel good when you make a mistake and feel good that you can learn from them. So learning from a mistake is a skill too. And as you develop that skill, you'll get better and better at doing that. And in time, you'll become a master, because the only difference between you and the best players in the world is they've made more mistakes and learned from them and applied the learnings, and they got better, and now they're the best in the world. So ultimately, we want to take our unresourceful frames of mind, what we're thinking, focusing on, our beliefs, the meanings we're giving that, and change it to something more resourceful, more helpful. What's going to help you get the result that you want? So we can do this, guys. So so as we move on, there's a few more questions. So some additional questions. Do you have anything to add onto that, Jen, before we follow into the additional questions this students asked us to answer?
No, I love what you said. And I'm looking forward to going into the other questions. And funny enough, so this next question is, why do you believe sport performance anxiety is a relevant topic among athletes in today's world? And I was looking at your notes that you prepared before this independently of me and comparing them to my notes. And we definitely have some similarities in our response. So for me, what came to me in response to that is that the mind is our greatest tool. And if untrained, it can become our greatest opponent. It can absolutely sabotage us. That's been my experience in my own body, in my own life, and then with the clients I've been working with. And the topic and tools of performance anxiety are not taught to kids. So tools to identify and navigate and overcome performance anxiety. So in my experience, it's been a largely unspoken about thing. And if it happens to you, or at least when it happened to me, and when it's happened for some of our other clients, they've mentioned this. It's not easy to find resources or professionals to go to in order to overcome it. Like it's not like I had those resources readily available. So I think that's part of why this is such an important topic and why this keeps coming up, because there aren't really the resources.
Yeah.
But the last thing, like this is no different from other important, very needed life skills, which aren't taught in school right now, like budget management, like social skills, nutrition education, investing, mindfulness, critical thinking. And with the awareness, with the education, with the tools that really, really work, that are backed in science, like this is something that doesn't need to be here at the level it is.
That's right. And that's why we do what we do. So why do you believe sports performance anxiety is a relevant topic among athletes in today's world? So my answer to that question is one is quite concise. One is a common challenge to overcome for everyone, because we all have an imagination to imagine the future. But two, because most people are not taught, like Jen said, how to control their inner world. They're not taught how to manage their thoughts, how to manage their inner world, really, their inner thoughts and their emotions. So how to manage our thoughts and emotions is the main reason why I think performance anxiety or lack of ability to manage our thoughts and emotions is the reason performance anxiety is such a relevant topic, and because everyone gets it. And really, this is why I think sports are such a fantastic thing for kids, not because like they learn, like just for so many reasons. They learn how to be competitive in a healthy way. They learn how to they learn how to do the extra work. They learn the work ethic, but ultimately they're kind of pushed to learn how to manage their thoughts. And this can generalize into all other areas of their life, including their social life, their work life, their studies, etc. So that's why I think, that's the answer to that question. So the next question: what are the symptoms of good versus bad anxiety, and how can you ensure you have the optimum level of arousal, aka good anxiety? So my answer to this first is, like, I straight up will not give. I think words are very powerful, and when we label things in a certain way, it can imprison us into that label that we've boxed it in. So I don't think there is good versus bad anxiety, in my opinion. I only think there's just like bad anxiety in the terms of like it's not unresourceful. Anxiety is the only anxiety. Performance anxiety, I don't think is good in any sense. So what actually I think is you're labeling as good anxiety there, I think is purely the labeling of the body's normal reaction to doing anything you care about, especially with sports involved. Your body's normal reaction is to release adrenaline into the system, into the bloodstream, so that you can have the best chance at giving your best performance. It's actually performance enhancing. And people think, well, I feel this nerves and this butterflies, and because they label it as anxiety rather than my body's actually trying to help me increase my performance through a performance enhancing drug naturally released into my body, they begin, because they've labeled it this certain thing, it's anxiety. Now it begins thought looping, and you've associated it with something negative. And because that negative association comes, then now the thought loops start about what might happen in the future, and this is a bad thing. But no, this is just a feeling you're having. And the feeling is your body's attempt to help you perform even better. Because, evolutionarily, if you were going after an animal, you saw an animal and you're like, I'm going to chase this down, your body is like, let me help you because I want to eat too. Like, I want to eat. So it releases some performance enhancing adrenaline.
And like ideally that actually sharpens like your vision and it heightens your
Everything.
senses, right?
It heightens your senses. It enhances your arousal, heightens your senses.
Enhances flow state.
And if you can manage your thoughts, that will sync together into becoming the ultimate flow state, aka getting in the zone in the most ultimate way. So I think if you can label it as not any form of anxiety, it's just simply my body is releasing adrenaline for performance enhancement. Oh, feel that in my body, and breathe into that. So breathe into your body and keep yourself present into your senses, because if you start getting into your head, then that's how you start getting into performance anxiety. So if you're truly present in the moment, feeling your body for what it is, then you can't be feeling anxious, because anxiety has to exist due to a fear of the future. You can't be anxious about the past, it's done. It's like and you can't be anxious if you're truly present to the moment. So to overcome the adrenaline, that worry about the feeling of adrenaline, it's simply I've personally practiced, found incredible results in calming myself down through breathing into that adrenaline. It's like, it's like your engine is firing. So you just got to breathe deeply, calm yourself a little, let it ease, focus on what you do want to happen, aka rehearse and imagine what you do want to happen. If you're going to think about anything, at least think about what you do want to happen. And then you'll get to take full advantage of the performance of enhancing effects of the natural release of adrenaline. Anything else to add to that, Jen? So next question. Have you heard of the SAS2 questionnaire? If so, what is your opinions on this questionnaire to use as a tool to assess sports performance anxiety? For me, it looks great. I have had a little flick over it due to this question, but I haven't used it, so I can't really comment on this. Jen, what's your opinion on it?
Same thing. I hadn't heard about this before. After doing some research, I was really impressed, and I'm thinking we're going to add it to our we might add it to some of our programs to assess the starting points of our student athletes in the area of performance anxiety, so we can actually measure like where are they when they come to us, where do we get them to once at a certain point or at the end of working together. So for the people listening, a bit of background of what it is. This questionnaire, this scale, reliably predicts pre-competition state anxiety scores through assessing 3 areas that contribute to or drive performance anxiety. So those 3 areas are 1, worry, 2, concentration disruption, and 3, somatic sensations. And somatic is like in the body, like physical body sensations. And athletes are instructed to assess their pre-performance or during competition experience. So some of the do you want me to go into like any of the findings of, or is that not really relevant right now?
I mean, you could mention a couple of things concisely, I guess.
Sure. Okay, so my understanding of a paper that I read, which we'll link up. It's by, let's see, called Measurement of Multidimensional Sport Performance Anxiety in Children and Adults, the Sport Anxiety Scale 2.
From the University of Washington.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So some findings, performance anxiety in game can be predicted through the SAS2 score. So how you score on this questionnaire is like predictive of how much or how little performance anxiety you can be expected to experience before or in game or in whatever it is that you're doing. Performance anxiety can be reduced through interventions that train coaches and parents to create a mastery, I think my notes, a mastery oriented motivational climate. So instead of, I think it said, instead of focusing on like, it specifically used the term like ego-based goals, like, oh, I want to be the best on my team, or something like that.
So an ego-based
goal. An ego-based goal versus I want to develop the endurance to be able to run 6 300-yard shuttles in this amount of time with this amount of rest by this date. Like, that's a mastery-based skill.
So a mastery-based goal versus an ego-based goal. So yeah, I want to be the best on my team. I want to be known as the best on my team. That's kind of feels good to the ego, but it's not necessarily related to, maybe you would be the master, but the desire to master the craft. So you're saying less anxiety will come through someone who genuinely desires to be a master of their craft.
Totally. And that makes sense to me intuitively and in my experience as well, because when I'm focusing on the specific actions to help me get to a specific goal that's like skill related, it's mastery related. Oh, I can relax into that process because it's like I'm taking those actions each week and I see my progress improving. I'm tracking my results. Like, I'm getting there. This feels good. I believe in myself. I'm getting better each day. And the results showed that specifically doing this helps to reduce worry and reduce that somatic trait anxiety, the
feeling in the body.
Mm-hmm. But it didn't have so much of an impact on concentration disruption scores, which makes sense to me because the concentration disruption, that's the training of the mind.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Does this SAS test, does it have, so it's got, it tests for what areas? Somatics, worry,
and then concentration disruption. So these 3 variables basically are they ask questions that fall into those 3 categories.
The worry,
and then at the end you get a total score, but you also get a score in each of those 3 areas to assess where you're most in or out of balance. Which is really cool, which is why I think it would be super valuable for us to be even more focused with where we come in to help an athlete. Oh, they're really, really, really in the worry place, but somatically they're not expressing much right now. And
from there, so ultimately I think if anyone's out there who experiences a lot of performance anxiety, I think our approach is from taking it from every point somatically, so connecting just the approach of breathing into the sensations of performance anxiety. Where specifically do you feel it in your body? Just deep breathing into that part of yourself, which sounds funny, but just getting awareness of that somatic sensation, that can help reduce performance anxiety. Then taking it into the worry and the concentration. So what are you worried about? So what are the semantics, the meanings you're bringing to the language you're using? So that can go quite deep. And in my experience, the people with the biggest, most rooted performance anxiety challenges, it takes a bit for me to excavate that root up and really pull it out. And when I say a bit, it could be one session, could be a couple of sessions, but essentially some of the biggest performance anxiety, the most rooted ones, are really stuck deep in their frames of mind. But just so you know, that can be transformed. So this can all be changed. You don't need to feel like this is you forever. It can be transformed. It can be changed and dug up and pulled out.
Yeah.
And then just the process of training your own concentration, which is like, where are you focused on? And moving on from there. So do you want to add anything else to that one before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, just to quickly wrap up and just like lock in some of the things we mentioned. So I loved this paper and how it really dove into some of the variables we talked about, and then others we didn't, and how they can impact performance anxiety in this specific case for kids. So I just wanted to touch on how, for example, like self-esteem, it talked about how my understanding of reading this paper, and I'm not a specialist in this area, so I'm going to just reframe with that, but it said trait anxiety has consistently exhibited negative relations with measures of self-esteem. So my take on that, my interpretation is that as self-esteem goes up, performance anxiety goes down, and vice versa.
Totally.
Right.
Totally it does.
Totally. And so it's like, if I don't believe that my worth it is on the line based on how I perform and what result I get, well, I'm inevitably going to feel less worried, less stressed about a particular thing. So I thought that was cool. They touched on that, and we are big on that.
Well, and to put that into simple terms for anyone, if you feel like that is you, it's like when you develop the practice of unconditional self-acceptance, I accept myself no matter what, and you find a sense of wholeness within yourself, which can be coached into you or developed within yourself if you can go down that path on your own. Obviously your performance anxiety would reduce, because no matter what happens, you'll accept yourself unconditionally, and you'll have that feeling of wholeness no matter what. And yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Beautiful. And then, so a couple others. So we already touched on this, the motivational climate. So ego-oriented motivational settings, it says in the paper, where emphasis is placed on besting and comparing oneself with others, are associated with higher performance anxiety. In contrast, the mastery or task-oriented climates are associated with lower anxiety. So some coaches, and I believe even parents, were put through a training called Coach Effectiveness Training, which trained them in creating a task or mastery-oriented motivational climate for kids. And so children exposed to trained coaches and parents exhibited reductions in anxiety scores over the course of the season, whereas children who played for the untrained coaches showed increases on all subscales, which I understand to mean those three areas: worry, concentration disruption, somatic sensations, and total score, as competitive pressures increased near the end of the season. So significant reductions in total score, somatic anxiety, and worry. So not so much concentration disruption occurred in the group with parents and coaches that were trained. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then finally, just like I think those are the main ones I'm going to touch on. So
yeah.
Cool.
So we'll move on to the next question. So the next question, we've got three left. So basically two left. How do different contexts affect sports performance anxiety? So my answer to this is yes. Different contexts affect sports performance anxiety. Okay, different coaches. If you know a coach is going to yell at you for making a mistake, you're probably going to be more anxious about making a mistake than someone who's going to be like, hey, I saw you make that mistake. Hey, that happens. Let's figure that out. I notice you're not bringing your head up.
Totally.
And that approach. So someone who actually coaches you via proper coaching, not yelling at you.
Motivational climate, growth mindset climate.
Who says, hey, I'm going to hold you to a high standard. I want you to go and practice on this and this at home, because that's going to help you stop making that same mistake, for example. So coaches, different parents, same thing. So parents, I've noticed parents make the mistake of generalizing, like saying, oh, you didn't play well today. What was wrong with you? Or things like that. That's very not helpful.
Like, oh, honey, you didn't have a good game today, huh?
Yeah, which is a massive generalization. So I'm always a big believer in focusing. If you're going to give feedback to your child, focus on sensory-based facts. So you didn't do well today is not a sensory-based fact. That's your evaluation of a whole game. So if you're going to give actual feedback in a helpful way, that's going to help build that's factual and it's supportive, it's going to be, hey, you know, you did, if you're going to give any feedback, I think point out specifics. They did, someone, you cannot say that. You did not do well today. Okay, did they do one good pass? Did they do anything well? Did they do one good run? Did they do one good kick? Did they do 5 good tackles? Like, they did some things good, so point them things out. You did this well. You did this well. I saw you did a few good passes, and you seemed like you felt fit today. And then you can inquire. I noticed that you made a few mistakes there, and you got in your head, and it looked like that to me. What do you think? Like,
yeah, like what was your experience of it?
Yeah, and then it creates like a open, safe container for the child to talk about it and decide whether they want to work on that specific area so they can improve that area and feel less of that. But essentially, feeling bad because you didn't play well, quote unquote well, after a game is not a very healthy form of motivation, because that's about as far as it will go. But 2, it's like, it's a game. It's a game in their precious life. We don't have to feel bad about it. And I say this from experience. I spent years feeling bad, self-attacking, and just so you know, if you're listening, parents, it can generalize across the board to other areas of their life. Because I'm not good at soccer, I don't feel good about myself. I'm not good enough. And they don't say I'm not good enough at soccer kicks. I'm not good enough at soccer passing. They say I'm not good enough. And that generalizes to their person. I'm not a good enough person.
Totally.
I just wasn't good enough. And they start feeling bad about themselves, self-attacking, and it can turn into depression, anxiety, all this stuff. And I say this from experience in working with kids and my own experience. So, different parents, the way that parents support or add fuel to the fire can affect the thing. If the parents, especially in leading up to games, are supportive in terms of, are you focused on what you want? What's going on? What do you hope to achieve this game? It's all right, are you feeling some nerves? Okay, it's just your body's release of adrenaline. Bring it back down, breathe into it, so you can support your child in that sense. So other contexts, ID selectors, there's people watching me and judging me, and if I get selected, I'm going to get this stuff. And then this becomes what I hear often. It's an important game. So this is an important game that I have to win. It's like, that's going to increase performance anxiety. So a way of, which is a funny thing, it's like, well, I have to do well because it's an important game. Well, and there's more on the line now. You're going to feel more anxiety about that. Well, how about bring it down to, I play best when it's just a game, I'm having fun, I'm going to actually just do my absolute best. Of course, I'm going to try my absolute best, but this game is just another game that I'm going to do my best to perform in. And try to reduce the importance, quote unquote, importance of the game. And that's reduce that through mental emotional control or mental emotional management. So managing your thoughts. That's it.
Right. Yeah. And even just like thinking about into the future. Well, this isn't like I'm going to have another game next week, or I'm going to have, the next month.
Is it the last?
It's not the be all end all
ever. Yeah.
That perspective.
Yeah.
Helps a lot.
Exactly. So, and then another context that can affect sports performance anxiety, the difficulty of opponents. So, if you're going out and playing a really tough team, and this can come back to if you don't like to lose, and if you're afraid to get trampled on by the opponents. But if you're grounded in that and it's like, oh, I'm going out and just going to do my best. If we lose, we lose. That's part of the sport. If you're relaxed with that. But sometimes if the opponent's too difficult and it's like and you really care about the outcome, then of course you can feel performance anxiety because you're worried about getting trampled on by the opponents, as in like really beaten really well. So it's kind of like equivalent to a 7th grader doing a 12th grader's math test. They're going to probably feel a bit of anxiety. It's like, especially as the game starts or the test starts, I don't even understand this question. It's just like, and they start getting into their head and they start thinking, well, what if I fail this test? It becomes this, the management of the thoughts can get out of control. So difficulty of opponents, and then different desires. Are you really wanting it? So the person's intentions, desires. So are you really wanting it? Are you trying to prove yourself to someone? That's a different context. Or you're just going out there and doing your best and having fun. So you can see who would be more anxious out of them two. And then different environments, such as different fields, I guess bigger crowds, and then different feelings about yourself. That's a different context. So different feelings about yourself on the day. As a teenager, I can remember if I had a bunch of pimples on my face, I probably wouldn't feel as good going out into a crowd of people. Are people judging me? Do they see that pimple?
Totally.
Yeah, we can think things like that. And then obviously comparison to others. So there's some different contexts that are related to sports performance anxiety. Anything you want to add, Jen?
Yeah, just add not being prepared. So if you're not prepared, of course, you're
not feeling.
You're opening yourself up to actual valid fears or worries about the fact that I have not spent the time to feel confident, feel prepared, be ready.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one.
Yeah, that makes me sort of think of something. There's some kids out there who I didn't do well, and they think they feel like they should have done well, but then they don't look at their preparedness and go, well, did I do any extra work leading up to this? And all the other maybe half of their teammates were probably doing 5 hours of extra work each week at home alone, and of course they're going to be fantastic players now. So a lot of the time it comes down to preparedness.
And you're making me think of too. I believe Tony Robbins, one of the most quote unquote, by at least my standards, very successful business person and speaker. He prides himself on being so prepared that he's over prepared. So it clearly works really well for him, and I mean that's only going to enhance performance, and you'll be able to quiet thoughts that pop up.
Yeah, and the fact is, no, you won't find anyone on the national team that isn't over-prepared.
Which
it's just a fact.
Leads us well into the next question of, do higher level players or teams experience more performance anxiety?
So this is the next question, yeah.
Yeah.
Do higher level players / teams experience more performance anxiety? If so, why?
Yeah, and I peeked at your notes, very similar to mine on this one as well. I said, similar to what you wrote down, I think they experience less.
Much
the higher
less.
Level players and teams would experience less. Part of it's, there's probably multiple factors there. One of them being to get to a higher level and stay there really does requires of you to spend the time on the mental game. Otherwise, you're not going to last. So while I know that I experienced it at the highest level I played at, and while I know I'm not in other people's bodies, but I'm going to assume that the national team players, they do experience nerves and some performance anxiety. Those thoughts will start to come up. Those sensations will start to come up. But while they still experience it, they have the tools to quickly take control of it, manage it, and turn it into something that's really resourceful and performance enhancing. And I would say perhaps the variable there as well is that those who excel and then stay and remain at the highest level, perhaps they naturally have, more of that mind control. Maybe they grew up in a family where they were exposed to that way of thinking, those tools, the growth mindset, or perhaps they're the type of people who also advocate for themselves more, ask for help, therefore then learn the tools to more quickly course correct.
Yeah. My guess would be that the fact that they're at that higher level is they have a work ethic instilled with them, and that work ethic, whether that's been demonstrated to them by their parents and they're modeled to that, and it's been sold to them by their parents growing up, work ethic is most important, and they've watched their parents work hard and all that sort of thing. The person with work ethic works really hard at their soccer, but that spreads out into other things. So if they're going to work on their mindset, they work really hard on their mindset.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with Jen. I think it's quite the opposite. Higher level players and teams would experience a lot less performance anxiety because they have done the work to learn how to manage their thoughts and emotions, which results in emotional resilience. They've built that, and guys, emotional resilience is a skill. It just comes through a lot of the things that we've spoke about today, and that can be built and developed. So if you're feeling low emotional resilience, that will come. You just got to keep chipping away at it and building that and building it and building it. So final question, which I don't really have an answer for, is are you aware of any research on this topic in the field? And if so, what is your opinion? What in your opinion is the best approach to designing research regarding this topic? So personally, my research comes from the hundreds of hours of coaching clients I've worked with and helped overcome performance anxiety for good, and also primarily from my own years and years of boxing and fighting in front of big crowds and having to really learn to manage my own thoughts in ways that it was either the boxing is a great sport because you either learn to manage your own thoughts or you're going to get hurt. So you're really pushed into learning to manage your own thoughts, and really it's taught me a lot about this. That's why I have a lot to say on this. So I don't particularly have.
Well, then also I just want to add your experience as well comes from the field of NLP and neurosemantics.
Neurosemantics, yeah, and NLP and the understanding. I've read hundreds and probably thousands of hours of positive psychology and lots and lots of study and stuff. So that's that. I say all my study has evolved my ability to, I suppose, articulate it all, but where the real learning came from was my personal experience within boxing. So I think if you're going through this, it's a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic challenge to be faced with because you now get to learn. You have the opportunity to learn how to manage your own thoughts, and it matters. So it's see it as an opportunity, and you really will. It really will make a difference in every part of your life when you take that opportunity and practice this and have the work ethic and overcome performance anxiety for yourself. Learn how to overcome that.
Totally. And what I would add is just like even that one paper that we referenced from the University of Washington, which we'll link up, it has a ton of references on the last few pages, which I believe which include different forms of, a bunch of research there that you can explore. So I would go there.
So we'll link that up, and there's a ton of research in there for you. So I hope that was helpful, and for both the researcher and any of those who are listening. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us. We'll pop our email down or contact us in whatever way. And
let us know what you think of this. We'd love to hear if you resonate, if you what you liked, what you didn't like, if this hasn't been your experience, if it has been yours or your child's experience. Let us know.
Yeah.